So today we're going to look at what is probably the earliest known, at least, prototype for Dawn of Man, which would be the game that eventually becomes Age of Empires. So this is part of the larger Bruce C. Shelley papers. This included things like game development documents, CDs, and of course floppy disks. And all we knew going into it is what it said on the disk. In this case, we actually have a disk that says Dawn of Man.zip 9/24/1995. And when we load it, we get this wonderful title screen, and it says Dawn of Man version 0.02.
When we started Ensemble Studios, I was one of the few people who had any experience building games, but most of the guys had built software of some kind. So I pushed the idea that let's prototype as fast as we can and then play it every day and see how it comes together.
So one of the early ideas that they had was that the game would go through and follow the life of all the individual NPCs. So they would live and die based on your actions. If you're not feeding them, they'd actually die. So food was not just a resource to say how many characters you could have, but rather you need food for your characters to even survive. So I'm going to open up a few of the other development windows. The first one is the inventory. It shows some of the resources that they thought about at least incorporating into the game. Food, of course, being the big one. You need food for your people to survive. Wood, stone, those are kind of the things that everybody has come to expect out of a real-time strategy game. But you also have tools, weapons. You have a limited amount of weapons to arm your characters with. Armor, and then there would have been luxuries. They're just named luxury A, B, C, and so on. So one of the other windows we can load are statistics. We can say that currently the lifespan is 7. Now, I don't know what 7 is, 7 ticks of the in-game cycle. 7 years, I don't think so, because I've had my characters die quite quickly. But it also lists things like disease and crime, which is very much not something you associate with Age of Empires at all. Your maximum population, your current population. You have a birth rate that would change based on the other factors in the game. Again, not all of this is implemented, but it's there showing that they're considering it at this point in the game. You do have population, where you'd be able to see your population of explorers, your foragers, fishermen. You have different lumberjacks. You have actual tool makers would be their own class as well. Armorers, but really we just have other. We have 5 other things because it's just not tracking it at this point. So I'm just going to resume the game, and it can be hard to actually move them around because the targeting is very, very loose, but we can move our characters around. There is a small build thing where it does allow us to build some small things, like we could build a lean-to. Of course, right now I'm just kind of selecting things. Now, in this early build, what will happen is sometimes it will allow me to start building things, but it won't actually show up at first. Sometimes I have to save and reload the game for the buildings themselves to show up. I can do some things though, because we can move our characters around to see the rest of the map, but that could take a little while because they move very, very slowly. So I'm going to pause it again. And luckily this build has some development tools built into it. Think debug menu sort of things, and we're just going to complete visibility to show exactly what the map looked like. So this will allow us to more quickly see the sorts of things that they were thinking about. Lots of trees, which, I mean, that's kind of typical. You start to see some of the other terrain that they were playing with. But we also have things like fish that are just kind of hanging out with the most low quality logo that you possibly could imagine. Ore and stone just shows up as this blank label. We can look down down the other way. You can see some desert with rock, but there's no other even enemies on the map for you to fight against. This is all there is to it in this early build. Now, I am going to load the other thing because that shows some of the actual buildings that you could load. It still looks the same when we start out, in that we've got our small population, but as we start to look over here, we get to have a bit of a feel for what the game would have looked like. You have Colosseums, which of course definitely showed up in Age of Empires. Some of the buildings that would show up. Some of the huts just kind of appear throughout the land. Now there are actually development tools built into it beyond some of this other stuff, so we can actually change our terrain however we wanted. So I'll move this. I could have ice here if I wanted it. We could have lines of crops, but you could spend quite a bit of time and you have something that really looks like it should. And this is a few years, I think, before the game actually came out. And this isn't even the only build we have. This is the only one of Dawn of Man, but we do have some other Age of Empires builds that were still pre-release, but not quite as early.
Okay.
And the same for Age of Empires 2, we have a few builds of that. We heard from Bruce Shelley just that he was happy to see that the material that he donated at the museum was being used. This is always good, you know, sometimes when you donate something, you're not sure exactly how it's going to be used. It could be used in an exhibit, it could be used in some other way, but being able to really bring that out to everybody else, that's really kind of what I wanted to do when I started to do the Twitch stream. Is we know that Rochester is a little bit out of the way for some people, and while it's awesome to come here, it's also great to be able to share that collection with everybody, no matter where you are in the world.